Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/WeHaveWays.
Time was so short. It was a race between the Japanese onrush and the arrival of our reinforcements. As I struggled hard to redress my errors and to speed by rail and air reinforcements, I knew that all depended on the steadfastness of the troops already meeting the first impetus of the attack. If they could hold up until help arrived, all would be well. If not, we were near disaster.
And that was Bill Slim.
Time was so short.
Achtung, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Part 6.
Don't like that. This is part 5.
Part 5. I'm completely I'm lost in the jungle, James.
It's part 5.
Part 5.
Working title, Crisis. I'm quite pleased because for once we've actually stuck to the plan.
Rather like Mutaguchi Renya. He stuck to the plan and the plan so far is working for him. His assets you could argue that the first phase is a feint, couldn't you? In the first phase, feint have been smashed to pieces. They're not going to be any use to him afterwards. So this second phase had better work if you're Mutaguchi at this point, right?
Well, it has, yes. So it hasn't worked completely because they haven't destroyed 17th Indian Division and they haven't destroyed the Gracie's 20th Division either. But they have got round the back without anyone noticing. You know, they are homing in on the north east of Imphal, and they are heading with great speed towards the saddle Naga village of Kohima. But fortunately, there is a little hill redoubt, little village called Sangshak, which is in their way. And this is, the Sangshak Hill is in the hills to the northeast of Imphal. This is jungle-clad land, the sort of plunging valleys, rising hills. When one is approaching Sangshak now, it's on pretty remote roads, and there's the kind of sort of corrugated roof sort of twinkling in the sunlight through the trees on the top of the hill. And this area here is held by the untested 50th Indian Parachute Brigade, which is commanded by the 31-year-old Brigadier William Hope Thompson, balding, slightly toothy, pale-skinned, blonde-haired, youngest brigadier in the Indian Army.
I bet he's quite the character, though.
And he's got Gurkha and Indian battalions around him, Gurkha and Indian parachute battalions. And the whole point is that they're there purely to acclimatise and do training, not anything else.
So, because there is an ambition to train airborne soldiers in the Indian Army. He must be quite a chap, though, Bill Hope Thompson, surely, if he's got that far in that kind of organisation.
They're held out on 2 hills. Not all of them are on Sangshak. One of them is one of his battalions is on a hill a little bit to the east. And they're all minding their own P's and Q's, kind of getting ready for training and acclimatising and all the rest of it. And suddenly a massive chunk of General Sato's 31st Division comes straight towards them. And they are the only troops between 31st Division and Kohima. It's an incredibly remote part. It really is. There's this amazing bit of road that you go off the main Imphal Dimapur road and you wind up through these hills. There's this place called Finch's Corner, which is kind of one of these sort of Indian Army kind of early 1930s roads that's been kind of sort of hacked out of the ground by sort of Indian labourers and
bygone
so
sappers.
On. Yeah. You know, and it's just incredible. And it's sort of the sun's beating down and the crickets are clicking and the cicadas in the trees. And I mean, you can just picture it. And suddenly the leading elements of the Japanese 58th Regiment, which is Sato's spearhead, they clash with C Company of the 502nd Parachute Battalion on the 17th of March.
Yeah.
And these are Indian troops rather than Gurkhas, and they're surrounded and they fight absolutely ferociously, but they're completely slaughtered. I mean, literally to a man. And the Japanese report the C Company's final charge, which one of the officers puts a pistol to his head rather than be taken prisoner, which is very much kind of, cut from the Japanese cloth.
Yeah.
C Company's defense of this hill, sufficient to give Hope Thompson on Sangshak warning of what is about to come. He decides that rather than retreat, they've just got to face the music and deal with it, because he realised what's at stake here. Problem they have is they don't have wire and they don't have mines. They've just got shovels and picks. The terrain, and the interesting thing about Sangshak, you approach it and the road sort of wiggles around. It comes from the valley and climbs all the way up and sort of hairpins and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But at the top of it, it's kind of got one half of the village is on, it's like a sort of narrowish kind of ridge with a sort of dip in the middle. So on one side is buildings and a church or whatever. Then there's this saddle. Then there's a higher, smaller bit. So it's a bit like a sort of old-fashioned kind of Norman, you know, how you'd place a Norman castle. If it was a Norman castle, the four-walled square keep would be on this higher knoll, smaller knoll. There's a bit that dips down and there's a football field there. And apparently there was there as well in the war, I think. But anyway, it's a sort of flat area. Maybe there wasn't in the war. I don't know. But there certainly is a football pitch there now. So the main part of his defence is on this higher, kind of smaller knoll, which then plunges down into the kind of sort of valley either side of and trees either side. Creates this kind of sort of perimeter around this top with sort of trenches and so on. The only way the Japanese can come is across this saddle from the smaller part of this ridge across this saddle that the Japanese assault on the evening of the 22nd of March. And again, it's Japanese hubris getting in the way because the Gurkhas are dug in their positions. They're in their trenches. They've got their Bren guns. They've got their mortars. They've got grenades and rifles and all the rest of it and Sten guns. The sun is behind the Gurkhas, so shining onto the Japanese. The Japanese are blinded by the setting sun behind them. The Japanese just come towards them across the saddle, and it's just an absolute slaughter. And one of the people fighting there said it was like an optical illusion as men tumbled as they kind of just started to fall. God. Just absolutely like a sort of wave crashing across this saddle. And 90 men out of the attacking company are killed. Bloody hell. The Japanese never make that mistake again. No. But what happens is Sangshak just sucks in the 58th Regiment with Spearhead.
They can't resist.
To Kohima. They can't resist. They can't just bypass it and go, okay, fine, we'll just leave it. They go, we've got to reduce it. And so they bring up their artillery and they bring up mortars and they just defend them and they do kind of jitter raids by night and all the rest of it. And they're all directed at this kind of, you know, this northwest corner, this knoll on the top. And Hope Thompson's men are suffering badly, but then so are the Japanese. And on one patrol, they find the body of a dead Japanese officer, which yet again, the complete operational plans are found on his body.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is extraordinary because you remember there was, what's his name, Norman Bowdler, who discovers the guy opposite him in the admin box. You know, the guy who's clutching his eye and he pushes him over and he finds the covered in dew and he finds the plans for Hargo. Well, they find the entire plans for Yugo. And it shows that the main target is for the 31st Division is Kohima.
The brigade's intelligence officer is then able to get through Japanese lines with these plans and delivers them back to 14th Army or to 4 Corps. It's incredible. And that is also simply unbelievable. And they try air resupply, don't they? But the area's, it's such a tiny redoubt that there's no way of doing it.
And it really is small. I mean, you know, when I talk about a village, I mean, you know, you're talking about, it's a small place. It really is. It's small, it's remote. You know, there's just no chance. Instead, they just hold on. But the problem is, of course, is they're now cut off and they're running out of supplies and, you know, everyone's running out of supplies. So for 4 days and 4 nights, they grimly hang on, sucking in ever more Japanese troops. But finally, on the 26th of March, after being sent a clear signal over the radio that it's time to withdraw, Ho Thompson orders all those still standing to try and break out. And they break out at around 11 o'clock that night, having fired the last of their, you know, mortar and artillery shells in one great big kind of flurry. And they make a dash for it, and they're all entirely successful. I think the main reason is because the slopes are quite steep, and I think you can sort of scramble through the jungle. You know, the jungle suddenly is very much your friend. You know, the Japanese are all dug around the redoubt and heading out to the east, and you're trying to get to the kind of, you know, to the west. The redoubt is in the northwest rather than the northeast. I can sort of, you know, when you're there, you can sort of see how they did it, but they do. While the 50th Parachute and the Indian Parachute Brigade that sacrifice has very far-reaching and frankly decisive consequences.
652 casualties and 100 wounded are captured as well. But at the cost of the Japanese, you know, 2nd Battalion, 58th Regiment, the Japanese lose 400 men in the process.
And they're completely held up. I mean, I think the key things is it takes them 4 days from the Burma border to get to those hills around Sangshak. about 60 miles. So they do 60 miles in 4 days, which is pretty good going in that train because it is up and down, up and down, up and down all the time. But it then takes them a further 5 days to go the remaining 25 miles to Kohima. And, it just tells you what a debilitating, crushing event that is for the Japanese. And it holds them up. And time is absolutely of the essence. The clock is ticking so badly.
And if you're on a 20-day ration scale, 4 days.
Well, and then add another 5. So you've had 4, then you've had another 4, and then you've got another 5. So that's 13 days out of your 20.
More than half of your ration scale, and you haven't even... You haven't
got to where you're supposed to be.
You've been distracted. I mean, poor old Hope Thompson, because it doesn't do him any favours, this action. But it's as crucial to the 4-course success.
Well, it's the whole Imphal battle.
Yeah.
It's one of the key moments because this delay at Kohima, the delay getting the Sato's men of the 31st Infantry Division to Kohima is absolutely crucial to what happens. But again, we're kind of slightly jumping the gun here. And what we should do now is head southwards again towards Imphal. The crisis meeting that Slim has on the main airfield at Imphal on the 29th of March. And this is another absolutely amazing relic of 1944 because you can go there now and it's literally exactly the same. It's hardly changed at all. And later on in December 1944, Slim and his corps commanders, Scoons and Stopford, will get knighted here on this spot. But obviously at the end of March,
it's a long way off.
That's a long, long, long way off.
Yeah.
And clearly they now know that there's a very major Japanese force to the north. They're still not sure whether they're heading to Kohima or straight to Dimapur. But there's also a further crisis to be faced as the forces are heading, from the 15th Division are now approaching from the northeast. So this is where they've come across from, that they've crossed the Chindwin to the east, runs parallel to the Chindwin runs north-south, parallel to the Dimapur-Imphal road, also parallel to the India-Burma border at this particular point. They've crossed over and they've come to the northeast of Imphal, and now they're turning southwest towards the town, and they are very, very close. They've got to try and kind of counteract that, and they've got to try and bring in reinforcements. The only way to bring in reinforcements is by air, as it turns out. But the big problem is that the Japanese troops are now within a matter of a few miles from Kangla, which is a very close airfield to the northeast of Imphal. And there is a key hill feature as well called Numgshigum, which is about to be attacked. But for me, this is where kind of air power really, really kicks in. It's also where Mountbatten kicks in. As you know, Mountbatten as Supreme Allied Commander, Southeast Asia Command, I'm a fan. You can say what you like about Dieppe. You can say what you like about his loose talk and his square jaw and being too chummy with Noel Coward. But whatever. Yeah. Here, he's absolutely the man. The only way they're going to reinforce this sudden situation, because Scoons has already deployed his reserves, the only way they can do it is by bringing in other people. But you can't. The only way you can bring them in is by air. And what you do have is you've got 6 airfields, which you can use all at the same time. And you've also got lots of transport aircraft. But the transport aircraft are operating to support Chiang Kai-shek at Chongqing in China and not really supposed to be diverted for anything else. Now, Mountbatten has the right to appeal to the chiefs of staff and say, I want them to be used for other things, but it is ultimately the permission of the combined chiefs of staff in Washington and London to make that call. But Mountbatten, in a way that other senior commanders would not have done, says, sod that, I'm just going to make a call. I'm not going to refer it to...
We haven't got time for that.
So he diverts all the US transport planes to supporting that. And they bring in the 5th Division. Remember, Briggs over on the western side of the Mayu Range on the Arakan coast. And then they bring in 7th Indian Division as well, Messavi's lot. And the 5th Indian Infantry Division is the first division ever to be brought in by its entirety by air power alone. Given
the European theatre, Northwest European theatre, seen as the one where everyone's having all the bright ideas and doing all the technical innovation, there's a whole load of attempts to deliver divisions by air about to occur in Northwest Europe at this point, with mixed results. Let's put it that way. This is quite extraordinary, isn't it?
It is absolutely extraordinary. This is April 1944.
Mountbatten is able to make that decision himself because, in the end, Burma is probably the last thing on anyone's mind in April 1944. He knows that the people below him aren't going to object either, because what he doesn't get is pushed back, does he? There's no one lower in the command chain who goes, actually, have you not referred this to the chief of staff, or I'm not sure about that. They all know what the situation is. They're all 100% on board with it, aren't they? That's the other interesting thing.
Yeah, they are. And it's also one of these things that it's all a bit, again, it's a bit Gadarian 1940. It's like, have the courage of convictions, but, make sure you win.
Yeah.
Then you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it's not a time for dilly dallying. And the 5th Indian Division under Briggs comes in and literally immediately is frustrated. They're literally off the plains and starting to form up and moving into the hills. And one of the key ones is this hill saddle called Numgshigum. And again, when you're there, you can see, you can see Kangal from there, the airfield at Kangal. Kangal's no longer there, now it's just paddy fields. But you can absolutely see it. And the Japanese troops have reached this. Although the interesting thing, again, the Japanese haven't been as fast as they might be, because it's not until the 13th of April that the Japanese start creeping up the kind of the northern end of the Numgshigum Ridge. So Numgshigum is a kind of sort of isolated slug that kind of sits in the plain all around it. And what happens on the 13th of April is dive bombers and hurry bombers, these are hurricanes with bombs on, are sent to bombard the Japanese on the kind of top half of the Numgshigum Ridge, the Numgshigum Hill kind of feature. And it's just like Artillery Hill at the Arakan. What happens is Lee tanks and infantry start pushing up from the other side. And again, the Grants are doing an amazing job. But every single one of the infantry and tank officers is either killed in action or wounded in action. So it's then left to the NCOs, the sergeants and the sergeant majors, to continue the drive forward. And they do it. They put it off. And as they sweep over the ridge, they find the bodies of 250 dead Japanese. It's the most amazing little action. And again, it's just like Sangshak, no one's ever heard of it. What the hell is Numgshigum? But it's an amazing little operation. Mountbatten then gets subsequent permission, retrospective permission to use the air transport. And he's told he can keep them until the end of the battle. And this is also key because it means that they can bring the troops of 33 Corps, which is the Army Group Reserve, up to Dimapur as quickly as possible. 5th Division and 7th Division are moved out of Christenson's 15 Corps and added to 33 Corps. And the other big one is the British 2nd Division, which is not an Indian Army division, it's a British 2nd Division, which is sent to Dimapur. And this is all part of that same operation.
This shows extraordinary flexibility on the part of the Allies. One of the things that's often thrown at the Allies is they're not very flexible. To be honest, what they're not good at is improvising, and their decision making is sort of a bit sticky. And this couldn't be more at odds with that way of looking at the Allied way of war, could it?
It's amazing. But, while Kangla is being saved by the heroics of the 5th Division, the major battle is developing at Kohima. And this is the 4th and final potential disaster to befall 14th Army. And it is, without question, the most serious threat of them all.
Right, well, we'll go to a break and see how the most serious threat of all is dealt with after these announcements. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Well, so Sangshak has just
has been and gone,
but also gripped the Japanese. And in fact, although poor old Hope Thompson rather gets the short end of the stick as things pan out, he nevertheless has done great things. And rather nice to see, the Japanese are, because the risks involved in Slim's sort of shakedown and change in tactics and all this sort of stuff, that it will work is the one mystery, isn't it?
Although, it seemed to be working at the admin box.
Well, exactly. So you've had
different.
A taste of it working, but maybe the Japanese will go, hang on a minute, they're doing things differently, so we need to too. But it seems they haven't. Funny enough, I was pondering this. He's got no Lumsdens in his camp, unlike Montreal. So he's not got that issue when trying to reshape his army, is he? Anyway.
So the other thing is, it's not just Sangshak. They've also had the Assam Rifles have also done a little kind of stand at a place called Jessamy, which is north of Sangshak, but is another of these little outposts that wasn't expecting to be involved in the battle whatsoever, and suddenly finds itself confronting, marauding Japanese heading north of Kohima. They managed to sort of hold up the Japanese for a little bit, then pull out in the nick of time and do this march across through the jungle, up and down hills, through valleys, all the rest of it, and reach Kohima. But Kohima itself is this really interesting bit because it is on this saddle. So there's a sort of Kohima ridge. It's like a sort of lower saddle surrounded by these much bigger hills. It's like a sort of meeting point, a sort of stop-off point, a stores point on the way down from Dimapur as well. Slim is pretty sure once he learns that the Japanese are attacking far to the north of Imphal, that Dimapur is the ultimate objective, because that's where the main railhead is. You know, that's where the railway line is. It's on the Brahmaputra River, blah, blah, blah. And it's obviously a much more difficult place to defend because it's down in the plain. You know, you're coming out of the hills, out of the mountains into this sort of plain by the river.
Whereas if you can stop, Kohima offers a sort of, because it's a notch in the hills, it offers a stoppage point, essentially. You can block it. If you're quick enough, is the thing, isn't it?
Yes, so I think what the Japanese are trying to do is get to Kohima, surround that. They know it's only lightly defended. Get Kohima. You've got this one sort of staging post between Dimapur and Imphal here at Kohima. Block that off. That means you're completely blocking resupply from Dimapur. You've secured your baseline for the next attack, which is sort of mainly on Dimapur. Problem they have is that they just don't know quite where the main thrust is. Is it all out for Kohima or is it for Dimapur? And if you know, there's so little supplies up at Dimapur at the moment, at this particular time, at the very end of March. So this is what's causing the kind of, you know, you don't know quite, do you stick or do you twist? Or do you twist? Exactly. Yeah. But General Kawabe, who's the commander of the Burma Army area, who is Mutaguchi's superior, has told him not to go to Dimapur. And so from Tokyo headquarters point of view and from the Burma Army area point of view, this is not about falling out. And it is very much only Mutaguchi who thinks it's possible to go to reach these dizzy heights and have this tremendous, amazing, far-reaching victory. But there is absolutely no question at all that if Kohima falls quickly, Mutaguchi is going to insist that Sato and 31st Division drive straight onto Dimapur.
That's all a long way down the line. Because, I mean, one of the other factors, though, in terms of resupply is the Allies aren't, unlike the Japanese, aren't dependent on road and rail resupply in total, are they?
Well, no, they've just done 100 and, you know, whatever it was, 60 miles or whatever, 120 miles in no time at all.
Yes, but the Allies can use air resupply. So part of his calculation is out of whack, isn't it? You know, the railhead at Dimapur is for airfields, for supplying Imphal as much as it is for anything else. The Allies have a degree of flexibility that the Japanese haven't factored in here, have they?
No, but this is why Mutaguchi is so keen to get to Dimapur. If he can get the airfields of around there and the airfields of Assam and cut off that crucial air supply line to Chongqing and to Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists in southwest China, then absolutely it's, you know, game on. So that's why he's so keen to get there. And he's really frustrated by those higher up the chain kind of putting a limit onto what could be achieved.
They're possibly being more realistic, though, aren't they?
They're being decidedly more realistic. But even so, I mean, from Slim's point of view, this last few days of March 1944 and beginning of April 1944 are really, really difficult, worrying times because it does look like it might all go a bit pear-shaped. That, you know, it's clear that some mistakes have been made. So coming to the rescue is the 33rd Corps, which is this one that was in the 11th Army Group Reserve. And it's worth just reminding that the Army Group covers 14th Army, but also the Defence Force on Ceylon, now modern-day Sri Lanka. And this is commanded by Lieutenant General Montague Stopford, who is possibly the best-looking British general we have. He's a very, very cool guy. He's born in, and again, it's worth just mentioning who he is because he's another of these anonymous generals that no one's ever heard of, along with sort of Scoons and Gracie and Uvery Roberts and Punch Cowan and all the rest of it. These absolute legends of 14th Army, but completely overshadowed by Slim and the narrative of the Burma campaign. But Stopford's born in 1892 in London. He's Wellington College, Sandhurst Rifle Brigade in 1911. So, you know, he's ticking all the right boxes for a career military man.
And he's not an Indian Army guy either, is he? So
he's not an Indian Army guy.
That's what's really interesting about him, isn't he? So he's in the BEF in France with 17th Brigade under Brooke in 2 Corps. Takes part in the Arras counterattack.
Yes, he does.
He has a garlanded career in in the British defeat in, I mean, you know, so he's one of the people who's actually come out smelling of roses from the fall of France, actually.
Yeah, he gets a DSO in France, along with his MC that he wins at Neuve-Chapelle in 1916 or whatever.
And then he's the OC of 12 Corps preparing for Overlord. Having been Commandant of Sandhurst, this is an absolute, like, gleaming army career, isn't it, really? In a way, had he stayed in Northwest Europe, I expect we'd have all heard of him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a handsome chap, square-jawed. He's one of these much, much better caliber commanders that have come through. And he's now suddenly been flung in the deep end because basically, although he's 33 Corps commander, the only division that's been in his command, they've basically been working up and training, while 15 Corps has been in the Arakan and 4 Corps has been up on the Assam front, which is Scoons and Co. The only division he's had is the British 2nd Division, Infantry Division. So now, suddenly, he's been handed over 5th Division, who you remember were the first division ever to be airdropped into battle in entirety. They're posted straight into Imphal itself. And then 7th Division, which, of course, is Messervy's lot from the Arakan and the admin box. So Stopford doesn't know these people. I mean, you know, he knows who Briggs is, he knows who Evans is, etc., etc. But, you know, he hasn't commanded them yet, you know, not in battle. And suddenly they're being flung to the Assam front and sent up to Dimapur. And, you know, this is quite hard to suddenly sort of get a grip of everything that's going on when you're in the process of changing from, you know, being strung out all over southern India to kind of suddenly being sent up to Dimapur. So that's all a work in progress. So he reaches Camilla, Stopford reaches Camilla, which is Slim's headquarters, on the 23rd of March. And then they have that conference, the famous or infamous conference on the tarmac on the airfield at Imphal on 29th of March. And suddenly it's clear that Slim has underestimated, as has Scoons, the Japanese ability to go. It's not that they're not aware that the Japanese like going lightly and can cover great areas. They just hadn't reckoned on them doing this huge, great 120-mile advance in such strength from the Chindwin in Burma all the way over towards Kohima. And it's completely thrown them. They've just underestimated their enemy, which is obviously never a good thing to do. The same day, Slim then flies to Dimapur to meet Major General RPL Ranking, who is the commander of the 202nd Line of Communication Area, which is so basically he's a quartermaster. And he is nominally in charge of Dimapur, commanding Dimapur, until Stopford and 33 Corps arrive. And Ranking is in touch with Stopford, but as I say, Stopford is on the, you know, he's sort of in transit a bit. And they've already sent forward 161 Brigade from 5th Division. So 5th Division in its entirety gets sent to Imphal, but less 1 brigade, which is sent to Dimapur.
But Ranking's the man on the ground, isn't he?
Ranking's the man on the ground. And so he sends Brigadier Warren, Dermot Warren, down to Kohima when they get there. So they go down to Kohima, and they've been told that the Japanese are expected to be in Kohima by the 3rd of April, and possibly the Dimapur by the 10th of April. But it's all a bit desperate because 33 Corps is coming, the 2nd Infantry Division is coming, Stopford and his headquarters are coming, but they're not there yet at the beginning of April, and suddenly they've got kind of pretty accurate estimates about when the Japanese are going to be arriving. So both Stopford, who still hasn't yet taken command, and Ranking are both trying to protect Kohima and Dimapur at the same time. So Stopford is planning to concentrate 33 Corps northeast of Dimapur and hurry a blocking force south, and praying this is going to be enough, but it's just all a bit touch and go. And the truth of the matter is they're second-guessing Japanese intentions, and they don't have enough to do both. That's the problem. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in essence, both sides don't have enough to do both. And so it's actually about making the right decision, isn't it? Plumping for the right choice, which is, these are difficult but incredibly important decisions, aren't they? You don't envy anyone in any of these situations, do you?
Yeah, no, not at all. You know, milestone 72 is where the Japanese cut the Imphal Kohima road. That's happened on the 29th of March, which is that same day that Slim is having his meetings at Imphal with Scoons and with Stopford, and then flying up to see Ranking at Dimapur. You know, Stopford and Ranking are both worrying that if 161 Brigade is quickly surrounded and defeated at Kohima, then there's absolutely nothing with which to defend Dimapur for a number of days until the rest of 33 Corps catch up. So by which time, of course, the whole thing might be too late. So these are really, really difficult decisions to make. As it happens, Stopford arrives at Jorhat, which is just kind of northeast of Dimapur, and sets up his corps headquarters there on the 3rd of April. And Slim gives him his instructions, which is 1, to cover the concentration of his corps as far forward as practicable, 2, to secure the Dimapur base, 3, to reinforce and hold Kohima, 4, to protect as far as possible without jeopardizing points 1 to 3, the Assam Railway, the China route airfields, and the Brahmaputra Valley. So, great, but that's quite a lot when you haven't got all your troops there yet, when basically you're a corps headquarters and 1 brigade.
Yes, there's some ideal world stuff going on in there, isn't there?
But it gets worse, because on the 2nd of April, before Stopford has taken over from Ranking, the latter, who is still nominally in charge at Dimapur because Stopford hasn't arrived yet, receives RAF photo reconnaissance warning of Japanese troops heading towards Dimapur. So that same day, he orders 161 Brigade to fall back from Kohima. So they've just got to Kohima, and he goes, actually, no, turn around and head backwards instead. Brigadier Dermot Warren, who's on the spot now at Kohima, is absolutely horrified by this, because they know the Japanese are about to arrive. And obviously it's a really bad look to kind of suddenly abandon the rest of the garrison, which is, let's face it, kind of, you know, bottle washers, medical staff, stores, logistics people, you know, service corps types. Already being sent there is Colonel Hugh Richards, who in the middle of March was a staff officer at GHQ Delhi and is suddenly told to go there and take command of Kohima with whatever he can muster, and sort of, you know, work out a perimeter, start digging slit trenches, all this kind of stuff. He gets there on the 23rd of March. He's given orders to deny Kohima to the Japanese as long as possible without being destroyed yourself. It's just like, great,
yeah,
okay,
fine, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, got it. So, you know, it is now the 2nd of April. Stopford hasn't reached the front yet. 161 Brigade has been told to kind of turn around.
Well, and if he's just arrived, he's not going to want to up sticks and go again either. That's the other thing.
No, of course not. But there might be bigger things at stake, you know, which, you know, Warren doesn't know about. But as it turns out, the RAF report was incorrect. They're not heading to Dimapur. They're heading just all out for Kohima at this point. So there's 15,000 Japanese troops literally due to arrive the following day. And there's only about like 2,000 men in total at Kohima, possibly. Something like that. Maybe 1,700.
And 1,000 of them are line of communication troops.
So it's a very, very, very difficult situation there.
But this would have all been far worse had the flypaper at Sangshak not delayed, absorbed, slowed up, distracted the Japanese from pushing on. Should have just surrounded them and bypassed them and carried on, rather than insisted on trying to fight them.
Yeah, had they done that, they would have been there a week earlier. So there would have been no 161 Brigade. Colonel Hugh Richards would be there, but there'd be nothing else at all. So that is a big, big factor. As it is, they've just got a whisker of a chance to try and turn this around. But it is a massive race against time. You know, the movement of staffs of GHQ India had unquestionably performed miracles because, you know, 2nd Division had been dispersed all around southern India. You know, 161 Brigade is there. The rest of 5th Division is already there, but albeit, you know, defending Imphal rather than Kohima. You know, other units are arriving to Dimapur by air and another brigade by rail. A regiment of tanks is on its way. And Auchinleck, you know, who is the CNC of India, has also flung in the kind of 268 Indian motorised brigade for kind of good luck. But Slim says at this point, as I shuttled between Dimapur, Imphal and my headquarters at Camilla, I was beginning to see light. We had hard days ahead of us, but everywhere our troops, unperturbed by events, were steady and full of fight. We had lost nothing vital. Not yet.
Not yet. Easy for you to say, Slim. But what it comes down to is, can Kohima hold out? And the Japanese, they very much need to win because they're going to end up running on fumes very soon. We've sort of said, oh, the foolish Japanese for this way of doing things. But actually, it adds a vast slab of urgency to the way they fight and what they're going to do. Because they absolutely have to win as well, because otherwise they're stranded 120 miles from their own lines, without food, ammunition, or fuel. So
I would say that in the wider Imphal battle, you know, the situation is very critical north of Imphal because we kind of jumped the gun in the previous episode when we were talking about Numgshigum. You know, that hasn't actually happened yet. But at Kohima, the next week, the next 2 weeks, that is going to be the decisive period. You know, can they hold on? Will they get overrun? Will the Japanese get the supplies they desperately need, or will they just bleed out? That is the critical factor. And what happens, we will find out in our next
episode.
And final episode in this exciting, sizzling series of Burma 44.
Now, if you want to listen to all of these in one chunk, then become an officer class subscriber to our Apple channel. Or even better, become a Patreon, where right this minute, everything that was recorded at We Have Ways Fest has been put up for you to listen to. All sorts of different people talking about all sorts of different stuff. Though I have to say, apparently, we left the oral equivalent of the lens cap on for the first 10 minutes of my chat with Tony about Arnhem, apparently. So you just have to guess what I said at the start of that talk. I mean, buy the book to find out. Anyway,
yeah, that's a brilliant segue. Yeah.
So we will see you shortly for our final part of Burma 44, The Road of Bones. See you in a bit. Cheerio.
Cheerio.